Hello and welcome to another episode of DieCastRestos. Jason here, and today I'm going to be working on this slightly scruffy Mercedes 300 SE. This one is number 46C in the range. This example has all of its existing parts, and conveniently I don't need to purchase or replace any more. So as you can see, there's a lot of surface paint that has been scratched off here. It's in really good working order otherwise though. I personally just wanted an excuse to go out and buy some nice green paint and bring one of my favourite body shapes back to life. So as per usual, I drill out the rivets. I then removed the wheels using some needle nose pliers, flattening the less bulbous end of the axle, and then I use a flat-headed screwdriver to remove the base. And the interior is revealed. The suspension is just sitting on top of this, just a small plastic component, and the slightly grubby interior, which just needs a bit of a clean. The plastic windscreen is held on by another small rivet, so that will need to be removed, which I do ever so gently just so I don't go through the roof. And just giving it a little bit of force by popping under my dental tool, pops out like that. Here you can see how small that rear rivet is. Now I know on Marty's Matchbox No he's very recently done this model as well, and he glued the model back together, but I'm going to attempt to see if I can pop the model back together just using some force and see if it holds together well enough, because I don't like the idea of using glue. After using a file to round off those rivet posts, I drill out the post on the front. Now using some brake fluid, I use a drop of it just to lubricate the post prior to tapping it. And then we move on to paint removal. Nice and straightforward this one. Basic coat of paint, non-metallic, so it should come off nice and easy. And then we move on to a bit of work on the base. So I use a dab of Autosol and rub it in across the base, just using my finger, and onto the front grille and the headlights, making sure that all of the areas are well covered. Next I'll use my rotary tool just to polish that out using a rubbing brush which is attached. Does tend to make a bit of a mess everywhere, you can see it spraying all over my desk here. But I love the results in my 73C Mercury video. Polishing the details on these original bases is one of my favourite things to do in these restorations, and I really am going to look to do some more in the near future. Just making sure you attack all areas. And now just for a bit of a close-up, I'm just going to buff it out a little more in certain areas, but you can already see how much of a difference it's made. It was very dull, quite drab looking, no real life or shine to it. But a little bit of a polish, a little bit of TLC, and it's back to its former glory. Now just removing the paint nice and easily after leaving it for about half an hour or so. There's a little bit of leftover paint on the doors, on the front, and on the interior. And the boot lid seems to have been cleared nicely too. So what I'll do is I'll grab my wire brush, give it a quick going over and just buff up that metal work. Now here you can see a bit of a blip on the casting where there's a lump of metal just on the join line here, so I'm going to sand that away just using an emery board. It tends to come off in a bit of a lump here, and after a bit of work it was like it was never there. So just having a quick look over the casting itself. Nice and clean now, all of the components there, nice straight edges. This really doesn't need a great deal of work. I do like to have a bit more work to do in my restos, but this one I just couldn't resist because I just love the classic Mercedes-Benz shape. So I want to priming using the Tamiya surface primer, the fine light grey. I coat all areas and ensure to have the boot lid ever so slightly open, likewise with the doors, just so they don't stick. Although the boot here did keep opening and closing, but didn't really matter too much on the priming stage. And here we go, just to admire it in all its beauty. That boot lid just won't stop. And here's I love this green, it's so bright and vivid. It's the Tamiya TS-35 Park Green. And I think it suits this model down to a T. It's near enough exactly the same. Now I'm a big fan of obviously using these rattle cans just for simplicity's sake, and I will endeavour to move on to airbrushing at some point. But for the meantime, I think that when I can find matches like this, it's absolutely spot on. And you can see immediately it just buzzes with life. It just picks out all of the details. These Tamiya fine paints are just brilliant for this job. Next I'll move on to cleaning this interior. All in good nick, just needs a bit of a scrub. So I'll pop it in the water for a bit of a scrub along with the windscreen, just to have a little bit of a clean up. No real damage here from removal, which is always good. Just like to recycle the original parts where I can. And the suspension unit, I tend to just clean up just for the sake of it really. Might as well wash all the bits while I'm at it. In it goes. And then the 4 tyres, which are all in good order as well. Just a bit of a quick scrub here with the toothbrush. And pop them on the side to dry on some kitchen towel, which has been reused many times by the looks of things. Nothing really too soiled on this, so a nice straightforward job. I've really picked an easy one with this model. Next I move on to cleaning up the axles using a bit of waterproof sandpaper. I just rub the axle in the end of my drill. Now I move on to the ends of the axle. Here I decided to write out the name of the model because I was doing a couple at the same time, so I needed to make sure I used the right axle in the right video because it matters that much. Now after watching some videos by Rob from Matchbox Garage, I decided to get some Citadel Nuln oil to treat the wheels and give them a quick going over rather than use my own creation in my mayonnaise jar, as these ones didn't need too much of a buffing up, just a light gloss. Next I'll move on to clearing up the windscreen using some Auto Sol to polish it up, just using a cotton bud this time. I think this works a lot better than using your fingers, to be fair, and not quite so much as I've used in my previous videos, but it buffs up quite nicely here. And I will also use some of the Astonish floor polish, which tends to give it a nice shine. So I'll drip dry for a moment and then hold it against the kitchen paper to take off any of the excess and pop it under a glass. Nearing the end now, and I'll just tap the axles back on with the wheels attached to the base. Just using both ends of this hammer. I couldn't find my rounded end hammer, but either will do, to be honest. It tends to hold them in place. Then I'll just paint the ends of the axles using the Pentel Silver Paint Pen. And then it's reassembly time. So in goes the windscreen first of all, making sure you follow the direction of the arrows, unlike I did there initially. It just clips back in after a bit of force. The interior comes next. Pretty obvious which way this should go. And then I speed this bit up because I completely obscured the fitting of the suspension unit. And then the base clips on, so hopefully this is the moment of truth where it stays together just by a bit of force on the rear rivet and then screwing in the front. But I'm pleased to say it did hold. So let's remind ourselves of where we were at. A pretty good model all round, but very play-worn, just lots of scratches. thankfully with all of the components still remaining, so not an expensive job other than obtaining the paint, but I love this paint, so something else is going to end up in green. And here's the base comparison, so the drab grey before and a bit more of a shine you can see here, and you can also see the completed rivet post. So now on to my rotatey thing, the model in all its glory. So from scratched and a bit dull to completely repainted and a little less dull, I don't know. Tell me your opinions. I always appreciate your comments, and I tend to respond to any questions as soon as I can. I just love the feedback, and I love this sort of growing community that we seem to have. I really love making these videos, and I assure you there'll be plenty more to come. So yes, thank you once again for watching this episode of DieCastRestos. I'll be back soon with another. And take care, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.